Hi, Antonella.
Hi, Lawrence. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
All fine. You see, it's a sunny day in a very cold Switzerland.
Thank you so much for joining us on Leading Beyond the Lab and our first series of recording. I've had the pleasure of knowing you for a number of years now, so obviously it's even more pleasure it gives me for you to join us on the series one of the podcast. Um, if you wouldn't mind, could we kind of take it back a little bit? And I'd love to hear more about your journey and how you've kind of accomplished what you have and how you've hit the milestones that you have in your biotech, academic, medical, and now your career.
I'm 50 years old, so, I have a heavy luggage behind. But that said, I think anything I've done wasn't really planned. At least it was not consciously planned. It was rather the ambition and the dream of a young medical doctor of having a meaningful impact on the world. So I studied medicine with a great enthusiasm. I also realized that studying medicine would have given me a huge, enormous opportunity because when you think of a medical doctor, the first thing that comes to your mind it is the white coat, the ward, the patients,
Yeah.
but there is much more behind it. So what I knew when I graduated was that I wanted to acquire a level of knowledge that would have allowed me to understand the entire ecosystem. So first of all, as a medical doctor, I wanted to discover research, what it is really applied research. And believe me, my first day in a laboratory was like, if you would ask me now, speak in Japanese, which I can't. I can't at all. So I was really taking notes. Each single word I used to hear for me was like writing down what I heard and learning. But I wanted to understand what was a research ecosystem to then apply it to the patient, have a real translational approach, and eventually also then later on, this is what I knew already when I was a very young doctor, that I would have had an impact on a political level, on a policy level, the broader picture, the huge impact. And that was what I knew. I didn't know that my journey would have then, developed the way it did. Actually, if you would have asked me with 25 years old when I graduated, where you see yourself in 25 years from now, all I knew is that I wanted to go back one day to the small village where I was coming from, being proud of myself and making my parents proud of who I became. So I knew that I would have been abroad. I knew I would have been far, but what I would have been really doing wasn't clear to me.
Would you still go back to the village?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm really bound to my roots. I think that's also very important. If you
Yeah.
are exposed to so many innovative environment, if you change your career very often, if you work with different type of cultures, you need to be rooted somewhere. You need to know who you are, where you're from, such as you can remain yourself, such as you can navigate also difficulties, because that wasn't easy. I mean, anything I did was easy, and all I've done was really based on myself. I can proudly say that if there is one person I have to thank the most, of course, I met phenomenal colleagues, I met great friends, excellent mentors. But if there is one person I really have to acknowledge is this lady, because I carried the higher burden of everything. And I was also lucky and blessed in meeting all these people that made me become who I am. So I was glad and lucky in choosing the right people, because that's all about. It's about the people we get surrounded with.
So, how did you go from helping people, helping patients in a very hands on nature to then making an informed decision to join the pharmaceutical sector?
Well, let's say that while doing the work of a medical doctor on a ward for psychiatry, I also had the responsibility of being a researcher. So I always had a dual job, morning patients, afternoon my mice. And that's already very different from the one another. On the other hand, at the top of my academic career, where I really hit one of the greatest publications for a medical doctor, I was just becoming mother. I got a phone call from a friend. We go back to the people we get surrounded, and she said, well, there is a vacancy in the pharmaceutical industry, and it's about schizophrenia, and it's about launching a new drug, and it's about the German market. Will you be interested in learning more? It wasn't a difficult decision for a very simple fact. I knew that if I would have stayed in the academic setting and become that professor that I could have been, because I was on the right path. I was just 30 years old, and great record publication. Why not? My concern was you will be stuck to that molecule, to that protein, to that
Yeah.
path your entire life. So let's explore and see what else is available out there. And that was a great choice because I realized at that point in time that there was much more than an academic setting, an hospital setting for a medical doctor. You see also where the real funds, the real, how to say, the capital to make changes in the healthcare system resides, because of course pharmaceutical industry has the power of resources that is much higher than what it's available at the university setting. And actually the first day I joined industry, it was very interesting. On the screen, they had screens on the corridor. You won't believe it, but there was the headline of the research which we did.
Oh, wow.
Yes, at the university in Zurich. So, it was a great entrance, seeing your work recognized on a screen, a news, right? And you enter for the first working day. It was phenomenal, a great coincidence. And then, then the story went on and many things happened.
And so you were at Roche. So talk us through that a little bit, because you went through various positions there, didn't you?
Yeah, Roche has been a great, actually, again, what I can tell you is that from the working experience I've had within Roche, I learned the most. And it's also about the culture of the company. I really, truly enjoyed it. It was a great working setting. And still today, I just now got a phone call from a former colleague. She said, I'm downtown. Shall we have lunch together? So it's that kind of belonging to a given environment. And there I've navigated, again, different settings, because I joined Roche before in the German affiliate for launching a compound for schizophrenia, which unfortunately didn't hit the market, but still it was a great learning because we had to set up the entire business unit from zero. And then, actually after that experience, I moved out of Roche. I went to the regulators. I've had 3.5 years of regulatory expertise within the Swiss Agency for Therapeutic Products Approval. So I've learned the work of a regulator, which was phenomenal because it was like going back to university. Every day you will get a new compound, data from phase 1 till phase 3, and you didn't know what to expect. Maybe it was an indication that wasn't familiar to you. I'm not certainly an oncologist nor an expert in infectious diseases, but that was the task. You could have get anything, and you had 90 days, 120 days, depends on the application, to come up with an educated decision, approvable, yes or no. After this experience, I went back to Roche. So
sorry to interject there. So on the regulatory side, there's no specific TA orientation. It's more a process that you evaluate.
It depends. The Swiss regulatory agency, it's a small one and has a small team of clinical assessors or reviewers. I was working as a senior clinical reviewer, and not necessarily you were assigned to your specialty area. I was, of course, in neuroscience and psychiatry, neurology, but sometimes you would have get applications for drugs in, cystic fibrosis or dry eye or cardiovascular indications. So at that time, if there was no one else that could have worked on that case, it was your turn. And that's why I'm saying it was like going back to university, because then you really have to study, and you have to learn about the mode of action of a drug. You have to refresh your knowledge on a disease area that it's not where you moved daily within the last maybe 6 years of your career. But that was the beauty, because it was learning again. And I refreshed entirely my knowledge to a point that I have to confess to you that once in a while, I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, oh, you should go back to study medicine now with 50, because it has changed so much. So it would be fantastic to even do that experience once again, to relearn what has medicine become today, because you cannot be on top of everything, right? And now I'm specialized in neurology, in psychiatry, but what's happening in oncology will be phenomenal to relearn all over again. Yeah, so that was my expertise as a regulator at Swissmedic. And we work, of course, very closely with FDA, with EMA. It's never that you come up all on your own with such a decision, whether to approve or not a given treatment for the entire country. We did often in collaboration with other regulators, but also with top key opinion leaders or experts in that field in Switzerland. So it was a wonderful working experience. And then I went back to Roche, as I said. So I was ping-ponging. But
with an extra string to your bow, because you kind of, the poacher turned gamekeeper. You had both sides of the experience. So when you were doing the clinical development or whatever work you were doing, you had that in mind. You could make decisions with the end in sight.
Absolutely. You start to learn. I have learned how a regulator thinks, which is a completely different way than how a drug developer might think, or how a scientist will consider evidences and data. And I think it has been a great additional asset into my professional skills, because it's quite unique. I mean, there aren't so many regulators, medical doctors around the globe. If you think about it, we're just very few. I think you have on the range of maybe 1,000. I don't know how many. I mean, we're just 26. So think about other agencies are certainly bigger, but we are not like a battalion. As I said, I mean, the range of those few thousands around the globe. And so you have a unique way of looking at things that then you can implement in your next assignment. When I went back to Roche, I went back to do CSF biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease. So I was curating not only the launch of those biomarkers, but also I was assisting the team that was doing clinical development for those novel biomarkers to come. And then you can apply that thinking in the new working setting, which was again industrial setting, and that was a plus point, definitely.
So how did you end up in the medtech, the neurology?
Yeah,
side
I'll
of
tell you
things?
a story. I mean, I was then, as I said, at Roche. I was there in medical affairs, clinical development. From Roche Diagnostic, I moved to Roche Pharmaceutical. I went then to Biogen, where I did Biotech, the launch of aducanumab, which is the molecule we discovered actually downtown here in Zurich. It was not a very successful story, but I think we've been pioneering. So fair enough, whenever you do something completely new, not necessarily you have the great success, and still now we have new drugs of the same mode of action that are making it to the market, which is for me a joy. But to your question, how did I move to the biotech? Well, I was advising to the medical devices and AI industry. I was advising already on a pro bono basis a startup and advancing their science. I was doing that on behalf of the scientific organization I founded as a hobby of mine, and that was the Women's Brain Project back then. Today we are the Women's Brain Foundation. So I was advising them on how to consider sex and gender into the diagnostic approach they've had based on a machine learning piece. And I was actually challenging the scientists in the room, telling them, well, nice that you can predict whether an individual has cognitive decline, but I want to know if your algorithm can also predict the sex or gender of the individual taking the test on this smartphone portable device.
Yeah.
They were looking at me like, what is she talking now? I mean, why do we have to predict whether the person has a pink brain or a blue brain? But I mean, fair enough, the algorithm was successful and accurate enough in distinguishing a man from a woman. And then, when they called me later on so we had this scientific collaboration, a publication on, I think it was Nature, it was a Nature Publishing Group journal. It's called Digital Medicine, if I remember correctly. And then they called me to serve as the chief medical officer. So it was a natural evolution of mine. And I really wanted to see the world of a startup, the world of an innovative idea like machine learning applied for diagnostic of, in that case, cognitive decline. But of course, I think where the highest potential is, it's really in diagnostic overall. And so that was my natural evolution. Of course, then it was an assignment in Washington, United States, so back and forth with Europe. Well, quite some challenges, above all, considering I'm also having a family and I'm a mother, but so far so good.
Kudos to you, really. That's a lot to take on. One consistent trend is you've always stayed out of your comfort zone, it seems.
That's for sure. But I go back also to the people who support you within that journey.
Yeah.
And I remember exactly, you met me in a time of uncertainty and difficulties. I was expanding a team in a startup setting, many things happened. And I can tell you that also to the support of colleagues like you overcome those uncertainties, those crises. So you certainly met me in one of the most challenging time of my career. So you really got the pure essence of who I am. And I said it, you get the right people, you overcome the tough time.
Yeah, I think AI, as good as it will be, it doesn't come away from the fact that great people help you achieve the same goals. So I was going to say, so if you were giving advice to physicians out there that are looking to join the industry, that inflection point that you made your decision, what advice would you give them as to the sorts of people that lend, either by personality or training, that lends itself to that side of the fence?
But I think it should be actually a must to get at least a flavor of what's happening on the other side of the bill. meaning even if you want to stay within an hospital setting, treating patients, it will be certainly favorable for you to develop as a 360-degree professional to see what is happening in terms of clinical development or medical affair activities within pharmaceutical industry. So I can advise to the younger colleagues have maybe even an internship, of a couple of weeks or a month or so, just to understand what they do, what's the work on the other side. For those who want to have a career shift, so more mature colleagues, my suggestion is it's a great experience to do, which also allows you to go back anytime. You can
Mm.
get in and out of industry all the times you want, and you can go back to practice as a medical doctor all the times you want. Sometimes we are scared of getting out of the ecosystem, losing the opportunity, missing something. Actually, that's not the case. I repeat, I've seen many colleagues either doing activities within the industry and still do in parallel their clinical work, because sometimes
That's
that's
true. Mm.
leaving the academic setting and hospital setting for a while and then going back. I think that it's always a matter of what you really want and attitude. I mean, how ready you are in exploring and willing to understand how the entire stakeholders work together.
What's the biggest difference in the way they go about clinical research?
Well, what I can say is that, of course, I mean, pharmaceutical industry has much bigger funds to do their own research and their own clinical development. On the other end, it is very focused and things might change very fast. Whenever the compound is not promising, then the whole pipeline might be cut out in a couple of months. And in the research academic setting, that's not the case. It's more like your passion, you're allowed to do things you want with more time, of course, less funds. I think that what I appreciated a lot in the pharmaceutical setting, pharmaceutical industry setting, is also the collaboration across colleagues with different background. I mean, also not only nurses and doctors, but also, people that have studied maybe economy or, that bring a completely different background, engineers, pure scientists. So it's more diverse, the ecosystem. And I think it's also less person driven and it's more like purpose driven. So
Okay, that's
now
a good way to describe it. Mm.
I might sound a little bit, not really sympathetic for my colleagues in the academia, but it's less about the prima donna. It's more like, let's make the bigger change for
Yeah.
bigger purpose, which is impacting then the well-being of thousands of people rather than your own academic career, your own professorship, accomplishment, and being recognized by your peers. It's a bit different. I found it friendlier, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Where did your preferences lie between kind of clinical development, medical affairs? What's your view on that?
Well, my view on that is, first of all, that the best way to do it is that you involve as early as possible medical affairs as soon as the clinical development is old enough. So as soon as you have a clear
Yeah.
understanding that something concrete that you can launch on the market, then you should start with involving medical affairs colleagues in getting educated themselves and then educating the stakeholders outside of your organization. That was, I think, a very unique opportunity that we had at Roche, where, for instance, clinical development and medical affairs worked really hand in hand from the very early beginning onwards to allow then later on patients benefit of a given solution that might have arrived 7 years from now on the market. I didn't see that in biotech. I mean, of course, biotech has less resources to make this type of activities synchronized and so early. And I think that's a missed, above all, if biotech wants to launch in broad indication where you need big muscles to launch a drug, if you know what I mean. Sometimes where big pharmaceutical industry, big pharma is very well positioned is in launching innovative solution where you really need a lot of education of the ecosystem to your given solution. Of course, if you have to bring something like a Me Too or a drug that is better than another one, where already the field is well prepared, anyone can do. But if you really have to transform and change, I mean, think about Alzheimer.
Alzheimer's is a good one, isn't it? Because that's an indication that they've almost forgotten about for a long time, and then all of a sudden it's kind of roared back.
Exactly, and you had an opportunity to launch a compound to help people. Nearly 50 million people have Alzheimer's disease around the globe, if not more. At least these are the official number of those who are symptomatic. But we know that amyloid deposition begins 20 years before. So there is a pool of undiagnosed people that roam around. And of course, if you want to launch for such a huge market, you need to plan medical affair activities years in advance. You need to get the best people. You need to work with people on the field on a daily basis. You have to go out and explain what is Alzheimer's, because if you go to a general practitioner around the corner, you might still think that cognitive decline is just part of normal aging, which is not. And we had really nothing before that. I mean, when I started neurology 25 years ago, the neurological book, the book of neurology, had I think one paragraph, one page on dementia.
Really?
That's what we knew. What we knew back then. So you see how much it has changed in 20 years, 25 years. We had a profound change on the knowledge of those type of diseases, neurodegenerative conditions. And I'm sure if I go now, as I said, I would love to go back to study medicine from day one. If I will go now to look at the book of neurology, I'm pretty sure that dementia won't be one page anymore, but it will be a big chapter explaining to students what it's all about. And you need to educate. So as I said, you need an army to let that change happen in the mindset of medical doctors. Medical doctors, Lawrence, I think I told you this quote of mine. I was once at Bellagio to the Rockefeller Center to make think tank sessions about AI and application of artificial intelligence, ethics, medical solutions. There were two philosophers, German philosophers in the room. There were some innovators, AI experts, people that knew how to code. There were policymakers, so it was a special set of people, and I was feeling one of the most stupid one in the room, by the way. So what I thought, listening to that conversation, I thought, interesting, philosophers, they do speak about God. Who is God? What is God? Why we need God? Priests talk to God. Lovers feel God inside, right? Musicians compose God. Doctors want to play God, right? So that's the mindset of doctors. Doctors feel like they are the God in the room. And so to change the mindset of the doctor, to bring that innovation, if you think about it, it's going to be very complex, very, very long also. And
I remember my parents owned an old people's home, and I grew up inside one. I remember a lot of the elderly there had come out of the World War II experience in the army, and they said that when they got back into normal life, if they were having marital problems, or there was a problem, someone was really not to get up in the morning, everything, even if they're arguing with their wife or spouse, they would go to see the doctor because he would have the answers. And it's like they're conditioned to see that person as the chief, in the trial, and tell them what to do.
But can you imagine how difficult it is to let that person, the chief, change his or her mind? It's very difficult.
Yeah.
So that to bring innovation within the medical system, it's the most complicated one. We've seen disruptive solutions like smartphones, like novel cameras. I mean, innovation is taken to a very record time in any type of medicine. It is the one that takes the longest. It's a matter of mindset. Yeah, maybe new generation will be less of this ex machina, deus ex machina, you know what I mean? Less of this God feeling.
Well, I'm talking to a lot of longevity-focused companies at the moment, and there's really different polarized views on that, which kind of speaks to what you were just saying, where longevity in some respects is focused on the prevention rather than the cure, healthy lifestyle, exercise, diet, sleep, etc. And then the other side is looking at other indications as all being part of that longevity, so like Alzheimer's and dementia could be one. And then the other side is looking at having some kind of pill which enables you to live longer. So it's a really interesting topic that can go in so many different directions. And I think for doctors it must be funny because your research has come on so far now in terms of practice. But back then you were making decisions without having all that information. Whereas now you're kind of being told that some of it was wrong and then there's new stuff out, and it must be quite humbling. It's quite a strange experience, I imagine.
I think it is complicated now to have to manage patients more than it used to be. It's also because now we have strict guidelines. The way drugs get administered and reimbursed, it's more strict as it used to be in the past. I'm talking 30, 40 years ago, right? I mean, on the other hand, we have many more innovative solutions. And when we speak about longevity, I mean, I think that certainly we have to guarantee that quality of life and life that is spent in good health it's as equal as possible across the population. If you think that a woman living in Switzerland has a life expectancy around 85 years, if you think that a woman living in India has 65, I think.
Okay, yeah.
So it's already a huge delta, almost 20 years. We might check the numbers, but there is a significant delta, a gap, on life expectancy across cultures and within our globe. So I think that first of all, we have to try to be more equal in that regard. I think that if I should give advice to an investors on where to put the money in longevity, in which type of thinking, I guess that it should be more than longevity, it should be legacy. So meaning which solution that has the most significant impact on the well-being of the population in general or in a given group, but on the well-being rather than living necessarily those few years longer or so as you said, Alzheimer, chronic diseases, neuroinflammatory conditions, that's also part of the longevity portfolio, because actually for me longevity, the real longevity, it is stop the clock of aging. So we should study how aging happens and see which are those molecules that, when targeted, delay this aging process and intervene as soon as possible to prevent all those diseases that happens to be. And, the major risk factor for diseases, it's age. So it's a known fact. The more we age, the more likely it is that we're going to get sick. So it's a complex field where also a lot of non-scientific people move around, often mix longevity with looking younger or, something that it's not really, it's more vain. And I think this is where we have to be very careful, to invest into something that it's really meaningful for humans, for unmet medical needs that certainly might delay the aging process and prevent, therefore, diseases to happen.
Longevity one's interesting, isn't it? Because with all these other modalities and treatments and things like that, they are targeting a disease or something, and then there's a clearer, once the drug or the product is commercialized, there's revenue streams, etc. So I can see how the investors can logically get their brains around that. But when you think of longevity, that almost prevents the need for other drugs. So that's quite a strange paradox there. So I can see it might be, I don't know what the investor landscape's like for it, but it's quite an interesting dynamic.
And that's the difficult part, because we have an entire system that it is created and conceived for indication or disease-driven treatment and approval, and therefore return on investment goes by disease rather than preventing disease to happen. And that's also the difficulty around it, that we know, for instance, that if we don't want to really get sick when we're old, there are lots of preventative measures that we can put in place. But who is investing in this preventative?
Yeah.
Nobody, because there is no real return in the next couple of years from now, and investors want to see investment returns in 2, maximum 5, eventually 7 years, but something they want to see. And when we speak about preventative measures, we talk about measures to be rolled out over time. Certainly, I think where the responsibility comes from, it's also governments. I think they should be more accountable for prevention medicine and preventative medicine. But certainly we will see in the next 10, 15 years if the longevity purpose, if the longevity movement continues, I think that we will see in parallel a profound change of how we approve drugs. So something has to be. Maybe we're going to have aging as an indication. Could be. Aging as enough justification to be an indication itself.
Fascinating when you think of it like that. It's totally new. When you talk to these investors, you've been in big pharma, you've been in medtech, various environments, and in these environments there are key decision makers and stakeholders that you have to liaise with. Thinking of this through the lens of someone that's looking to join the sector, or perhaps an investor that's looking to invest, diversify their portfolio and maybe invest in biotech or medtech for the first time, how do you liaise and manage up? How do you speak to these people effectively and impactfully?
2 things. The first one is you have to be authentic. You have to be authentic to be credible. So people understand very well also with communication that doesn't come across with words, but the way you move, the way you look, the way your aura is, whether you're serious or not, whether you're really credible or not. I also think that once I was told by the chairman of one company I was working for that, the best pitch that you can do to an investor, it's without even one slide.
What, like an elevator pitch almost, like a quick.
Yeah, your pitch doesn't need to, because I was like, oh, we don't have the
Yeah.
slides for us. And he told me, Antonella, the best pitch, actually he asked me, said, which is the best pitch that you can do? What do you need for that? And I said, well, actually nothing, because I just have to tell what I want to tell. And he said, yeah, that's the answer. No slides. That would be the best elevated pitch for convincing your audience that you're bringing across the right message. And I believe that's actually very much so. So I'm not saying that one shouldn't have what is needed, like on this, like a deck to present who you are, what you do. On the other hand, you have to be confident enough to make that elevated pitch without any support. It means you own the content. It means you are really convinced on your solution. And I think the third element, it is, especially in our field, how strong is your science? I mean, investors want to see scientific evidences that are robust. So plan early enough for a pipeline of scientific publication or scientific evidences that make you look as a robust founder or as a robust, developer of a given solution. Another way to succeed and give a good impression to investors, it's also to show them that you are already engaging with regulators, that you have conversation ongoing on any given solution with regulatory bodies, to plan already in advance, early enough, how you want to access the market. So to have a very good strategy on how you want to bring your solution to the market and which are the real users. If you want to do it all, you will come across not credible enough, because we can do everything. So narrow, focus, be authentic, go spontaneous, but also be very knowledgeable on what you want to communicate.
Yeah, it's very interesting about the no slide pitch. I think that's probably links to a lot of industries actually, because you think you almost have to start with the problem that you're looking to solve, don't you? And what's unique about your value proposition to solve it almost. And that's the same in any business pitch, I imagine. And I think now people's attention spans are probably shorter than they've ever been. So you've got to be able to make an impact quickly.
And actually, that's also the way I now do things. I usually talk to people. And if I even have to use this tool, like, a Zoom call, I really want to talk to the person rather than opening up a PowerPoint. This is going to be sent post-op, you send it later. And maybe you convey another meeting to really go into the detail of a deck. But for the first introduction, just really go as a human and speak to that part of our humanity, that it is what it's also the one that makes you save the most time. Because if you see that there is no resonance, if you see that no matter what, there is no empathy, just don't waste your time. It saves you a lot of time of not doing then the follow-up and the follow-up and the fifth conversation, and you waste the entire time.
Yeah, and for someone that's worked on the inside from an AI medtech perspective and have more insight than most in this field, certainly started it earlier as well, where do you see AI impacting drug and I suppose product development over the next kind of 5 years or something? Because it seems crazy right now to me when I look online and the changes that are happening.
I tell you now a funny anecdote. I was talking to my child and I was explaining to him what it is being a magician, why people used to in the past look in a crystal ball to predict the future. And I was trying to explain why people read cards, like, tarots. They call tarots, right? And he's 11 years old, and I was reasoning with him, and I was saying, people used to do that to predict the future. So now we go back to the history of God and how AI is becoming that type of divine entity that will be able to predict our future. So it's not anymore like the magic, Eric. We have it. We have a tool that can predict with a certain level of accuracy.
Yeah, that's right.
Our future. We can predict which is our partner best to be. We can predict which is our well-being to be. Thanks to AI, we can predict all this. Now, let's be more serious and more medically focused. I think AI it's a revolution. It's revolutionizing, while we speak, the entire medical ecosystem, and luckily so. The way it happened with me, for example, it was exactly AI that inspired me to found the Women's Brain Project back then. And I tell you why, because there was a publication on JAMA that said at that time, it was 2016, I think, that Siri wasn't planned to respond to topics related to mental health and female or women's health. I'm giving you examples. If Siri would have been asked back then, Siri, I have bellyache, Siri would have tell you, just go see a doctor, it's serious. Siri, I have headache, go to a neurologist. Siri, I have menstruation pain, I don't know how to help you. Siri, I have depression, I don't know how to help you. Siri, I want to commit suicide, I don't know how to help you. So in that case, that publication showed that we were training those models with not sufficient information and data to respond to unmet need. So for me, AI, in my expertise, has been an eye-opener of where a gap is. So it's a great tool to identify gaps. It's a great tool to highlight those issues related to the data set we have and then fix the problem accordingly. On the other hand, I think it's going to be the way we will diagnose in the future. Forget about doctors. Doctors won't be needed.
Really?
AI is going to be like the predictor of what's happening in the body of an individual.
That would scare me, though, I think.
There's
There's got to be a midpoint, surely, because my wife, for example, she had pins and needles in her tongue, and then that can be a whole host of things. And, we must have seen 3 specialists before we got to the right one. Worst being MS, best case being low vitamin D, and it ended up being the best case. But, I can see that being somewhere where AI could streamline that process and the emotional roller coaster behind it all. But if I had got that directly from a robot to start with, it would have freaked me out more, I think. Terminator style, I suppose.
Yes, but I think it's gonna be more and more like that. I mean, this will be giving support to AI powered solution. We will interpret, maybe sometimes we will reflect, sometimes not. So there are lots of risks implied. On the other hand, I think that we're gonna be better doctors, we're gonna be better healthcare providers, and we're going to be also more informed and educated patients with a good support of AI-driven solutions. I think we're just at the beginning still. We are not there yet. And there is a long way, including ethical implications. We don't go that front, but it will be a true revolution, I think. And I think that AI will take AI decision making, AI predicting the future, including our health, will be the more and more common. And I'm not so scared, frankly spoken. Where I am concerned is still let's say, the case, personalized situation or very unique case where you still need the medical doctor intuition. So I still hope that guidelines and AI-driven solution won't fully overtake the liberty of a doctor to go for an off-label prescription or thinking out of the box. And that's actually what I would love to see more and more. I would love to see AI-based solution, certain on a given result, but then to have super talented medical doctors that can have that intuitive approach, thinking out of the box, challenging the AI, understanding why the decision was taken and making a solution for the patients, which is really tailored to the entire need of the individual. Less of guidelines. I mean, guidelines are good as a flavor of what should be, but I think that sometimes doctors stick too much to guidelines and don't think out of the box. Because they're scared, of course, because if you take the wrong decision out of that guidelines, you bear some legal responsibility. But on the other hand, this is where we have to be bold and maybe challenge the status quo. We still have to maintain our capacity to decide based on what we know and our intuition and our being human for the well-being of our patients, together with AI, of course.
And you traveled that span and involved these topics in different environments. So how did you manage that, going from a big pharma to a medtech company, the behaviors, the different dynamic in terms of the working environment, I suppose less of a funding runway, but more of an innovation approach? Like, how did you manage that whole dynamic?
I was always driven by high level of curiosity. So if you are a curious mind, if you are resilient enough, and if you have enough energy, because in the end, it's also the energy that drives you as a human to embrace a new challenge. I think that there is nothing more beautiful than that, because you see a lot, you discover a lot, you reinvent yourself, you meet new people, you learn on a daily basis different type of things. Like now, I'm in charge of a foundation. I had to immediately learn also all the non-profits related issues, how does it happen and foundation from scratch in a country like Switzerland, supervisory authority, tax exemption, all things I've never done before. But that's the beauty. That's the beauty of being a human on this planet. And I only encourage people that if they have that curiosity and that level of energy, they should never be scared. And, it's never the end of it. I mean, whatever happens, there is always a new chapter that opens, and beautifully so. New people will come. Transforming, it's painful, absolutely painful. But once you have overcome that phase where the transition have to be, where you have to become something else, then you flourish, and it's just very beautiful.
Because you must have had that on steroids when you did your recent TED talk. That's a lot of exposure.
Yeah,
a big platform.
It's never easy, Lawrence. It takes a lot of energy. And I still wonder why I do what I do on a daily basis. I could maybe on a wonderful location somewhere in my home country in Italy, enjoy an aperitivo. But I think, again, it's a matter of what makes us excited and thankful to be alive on a daily basis. And it's always a first. Even my third TEDx was a first, if you know what I mean. It doesn't matter how many times you rehearse and train. I think we bear responsibilities, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good, but it's always different. So it's always a first in a way. And we should not forget that there is always also a last time opportunity, because life is what it is, and there is a first, but it's also a last chance. And so we have to really use those opportunities the best possible way, because you never know when is it the last time you can do a certain thing. So do it, and do it bold. That's my advice to everybody.
Yeah, on a much less grandiose way, I felt the same way about doing this podcast. We've all seen great podcasters being, producing and stuff like that. And I thought, this is totally out of my comfort zone. But I felt like I'd spoken to so many physicians now in the industry who constantly ask the same questions, how do we liaise with, or how do we manage key stakeholders? What's the transition like into industry? When you get into leadership, what are the key challenges? How do you overcome them? How do you mitigate the problems that you're going to pose? How do you manage funding runway issues? So that was kind of the seed, if you like, for the pod. So yeah, so I know what you mean, but obviously, I'm not doing a TED talk tomorrow or anything like that, but.
No, but as I said, you're absolutely right. We have to move out from our comfort zone and embrace the journey, and also not be too critical with ourselves,
Yeah.
Sometimes we're too. Another thing that I never really consider as a parameter of my success is how perfect I am. I never mind. I mean, I don't care. I know I'm not going to be perfect, and I don't want to be perfect, but this should not be the stopper. You know what I mean? I do it, and it just happens what it has to be. But I don't. There are many people that just don't do something because of the fear of not being perfect.
Yeah, the fear of change.
Yeah. They just move very fearful around. I think that's rather a stopper than a facilitator. So that was maybe also another secret of how I navigated all this different type of environment, and I enjoyed it truly.
When we worked with you as a hiring manager, how did you, when you interview people and things like that, was there anything within your interviewing style or questioning which helped you to filter out the candidates that didn't match those values?
I mean,
people could learn from?
it sounds very banal what I'm telling you, Lawrence, but always trust your intuition, that belly feeling.
Yeah.
It is the first few seconds are the crucial one to understand, is this the right person, yes or no?
Yeah, I can imagine that.
You have signals that drive you that way. Certainly what I want to see, and that's going to be difficult for future generation, which have a different mindset. I want to see people that are really motivated, passionate about what they do, people that are hardworking, that they have the broader picture rather than their personal career development, which is part of it, but that shouldn't be the main driver. And I also want to see authentic people. I mean, I appreciate to work with people which are authentic and that have no fears in hiding mistakes, or no fears in admitting mistakes or problems, and things can be always fixed. So honesty, authenticity, level of happiness. I mean, I want that people that work with me are happy. I always said it, whatever I was, I said, look, you have to be happy on a daily basis. If you are not happy, it's a good opportunity to take the next challenge ahead of you, because life is short. And my motto is really that my team has to be an happy team. There could be problems, there could be, thunderstorm or bad circumstances to face. But in the end, I want that people in the room are happy because we deserve it. Life is already complicated enough. We work those 8, 9, 10 hours, 12 hours per day. We need to be happy when we interact with our colleagues. And if this is not the case, there is no reason to stay.
And how have taken that gusto into the Women's Health Foundation?
Well, that's a phenomenal endeavor. Why I'm saying phenomenal? Because whether you believe it or not, majority of us are pro bono contributors to the work of the foundation, which is fostering research on how sex and gender impact our well-being and our health. Now, if you think about pro bono affiliated scientists, and if I tell you that we are beyond the number of 60 officially affiliated scientists with a core team of 5 members, you understand why I use the word phenomenal. To retain those talents, to motivate them to work with you, for you, on a pro bono basis, it's not a given. I mean, you don't even have the financial incentive, right? Because you're not paying people. Most of them aren't paid, but still they work together with you for a long time to change the status quo. So it's about motivating people, being a leader, giving the perspective that what you're doing, it is meaningful, give them a purpose, and acknowledging that without those people, you wouldn't be anywhere. It's creating that sense of belonging, that sense of shared purpose, that sense of gratitude that makes people stick to the team and move on. Now we exist since 2017, so we are not a young organization anymore. Actually, we have an history, a proven successful history. As I told you, it was a hobby of mine that was by side of my main mandates within roles in pharmaceutical industry, startups. Now I'm fully dedicated to the foundation, at least for this given period of time, because I want to scale it up and let it thrive in the next 12 months and see how the journey evolves. But I'm feeling blessed because to have on a almost daily basis unsolicited requests from scientists and talents, including patients around the world who wants to support what you're doing and wants to join your activity, your scientific work, your advocacy work, well, it's making me so joyful and proud and content, and that I can't ask for more. So it means what we're doing is important, it's needed, and it's acknowledged, appreciated.
Yeah. How do you manage that as a parent? How do you manage time and life? Because I find it hard enough.
Lawrence, I became a mother first time I was 36 years old. I was finishing my research project. I was in a negotiation with an editor at Nature Medicine. I remember I was holding my child and breastfeeding with this
Wow.
With the other one, I was typing back to the Nature Medicine editor to say, yes, we're going to do those experiments. It was behavioral experiments on a mouse model for Alzheimer's disease. Later on, when it was about my child still needing the breastfeeding and me back at work when he was 6 months old, I was breastfeeding him in my lab. So I organized a lady that would come daily to bring my child. I will breastfeed and he will go back home.
Wow.
How you do it? You don't have. For me, work it's not separate from my life. I enjoy what I do, so it's part of who I am.
Yeah.
My kids see me working on a daily basis, and for them it's natural. I also saw it with my parents. I used to. My mother was a teacher, and I remember when she used to bring me along at the school, when the director of the school would make those long-lasting meeting evening, and I would be there just playing or watching what they were doing, drawing. So I think, we are very blessed because our jobs allow us to do so. There aren't professions that naturally would allow this to be, right? There are jobs that are more dangerous but in my case, I was always able to carry along the two roles. I remember once when my children were older, I was the one who asked to my professor in that case whether I could have taken all the offspring of the lab up to a retreat in St. Moritz. We used to have retreats in St. Moritz. And it was a first, we had an entire group of mothers and fathers, and we all wanted to go to the retreat to speak about our great science. And I thought, okay, but if I have to breastfeed, I can't go. I breastfed quite long. So I just took the courage and I said, hey, Roger Nitsch was my professor at that time, said, I have an idea. What if we bring all the babies of the lab up in St. Moritz, we organize flats, and then we can all participate. And he goes and said, that's a great idea. And that's how it went. We had twins even, baby twins. my son, and we were all up on the mountains, and people who had no kids went skiing in the afternoon, and after discussing the science in the morning, and mothers and fathers, they went and changed pampers. Part of it's part of who
They're in
we are.
survival mode, yeah.
Also, how you bring it across. I mean, if you make it like, oh, my child might disturb, or if you're scared about it, then people would perceive it wrong. But if you think it's a natural thing, why would you say no?
It's a great example, isn't it?
And another thing I want to tell you why I succeeded as a working mother, and I've always worked, I learned to delegate. That was my secret. I've always delegated what could have been delegated to people who were good people, and my work gave them work, which made me also very proud of being a woman that by working and delegating part of the duties to someone else will make that person be able to have an income, educate their kids, have a family that thrive together,
Yeah.
my family. So of course I didn't save maybe what I could have saved or the other way around. I mean, no, actually I said something wrong. It's not about saving. If you want to have that success, you can't. You have to delegate, and you won't be saving, but you will succeed. On the other end, if you want to save, then you will never get to climb the ladder
Yeah.
and be that person you want to be. So that's my secret. Delegate, delegate, delegate.
Thank you, Antonella. You covered everything.
Thanks, Lawrence. I really enjoyed.